All right, welcome back. You're tuned in and listening to Back Talk with Sharona. I'm your host. My name is Sharona, and as promised, I'm joined now by Robyn Mundy, one of my favorite people and yours. So happy to have her back on for this final year in 2015 podcast extravaganza. Big topics today. So let's go ahead and get started. Robyn is a big Buffalo Bills fan, and obviously we talk a lot about the Buffalo Bills here. So we're going to start with that, and then we're going to talk about Evander Kane. We'll talk about one of the big topics that we're talking about today is the Miko Grimes situation. I'm going to get Robyn's thoughts on that. And then we're going to close out this segment with some Bill Cosby talk. So Robyn, thanks again for joining me.
Always a pleasure.
All right, let's go ahead and get started. I guess I'm going to start to become known as the Tyrod Taylor apologist or whatever, because I definitely do defend Tyrod Taylor. I think that he's had a very, very, very good first year as a starter in Buffalo. I'm not, that opinion is not a unanimous opinion. However, what are your thoughts on his first year performance?
Oh boy. I'm with you in the sense that it frankly surprises me, and I really
it does me too.
I don't understand the criticism. Okay, today Bucky Brooks put out some numbers that I thought were very interesting.
Okay.
Apparently, in the pocket, not out of the pocket, in the pocket, they also do quarterback ratings. Mm-hmm. And guess who was number 3 in the NFL ahead of Tom Brady?
Tyrod Taylor.
Correct.
His numbers are really good across the board. I'm legitimately, and I'll go ahead and say it. Matthew Fairburn and I had a Twitter discussion about it. I like him a lot, and this is in no way, shape, form, or fashion a criticism of him. I welcome opposing opinions and debate, but I am kind of shocked that I don't feel like he is aboard the Tyrod Taylor train.
And that's the thing that's surprising to me. And I live in Bill's Mafia land. Not physically, but mentally.
Hey, Robyn.
Yes.
Oh, there you go. You were muffled a little bit. It was kind of hard to hear you.
Is it better now?
Yes, much better.
Okay. At any rate, I don't understand. It's perplexing, and I've talked with several Bills fans about this. Well, first of all, regarding Matthew Fairburn, he's not alone in terms of being critical of, or I shouldn't even say critical, because that's probably not the right word. Skeptical.
I think that's a better word. They're not convinced. They're not convinced.
Right. Definitely not convinced. Even Jim Kelly came out. And said, I like what he's done so far, but, I'm not convinced yet.
Yeah, and I don't think anybody's ready to anoint him. Let's make that clear.
No, I don't think anybody is either. But on the other hand, when you look at his stats and you look at what he's been able to do, and now we're talking about a guy that's got, 12 games,
Something like that, yeah. I don't remember how many games he missed this year.
I think he only missed a couple. Yeah. But at any rate, he doesn't have a huge body of work yet. Mm-hmm. And, people are ready to just sort of say, okay, well, we need to focus on getting us a quarterback. I don't dispute the fact that the Bills do need to draft a quarterback. There's no question in my mind. Sadly, and I say sincerely sadly, because I liked E.J. Manuel, but I don't think he's going to have a future in Buffalo.
He does not. He's done in Buffalo. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. And I really hope that another team takes him on and helps him.
I do too.
That way for him to be able to process things on the field better, because he sure has all the other measurables. Mm-hmm. So, but anyway, getting back to Tyrod, it's been amazing to me. Matthew Fairburn, he was reflecting pretty much a lot of what I've heard and read in the media, not just from the media folks, but fans and others as well, questioning Tyrod. And I'm just not really sure where that's coming from, because the stats don't back it up.
They don't.
And he hasn't had much help.
Nor does the film, really.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. Exactly. So I think I think there's two schools of thought about Tyrod, and the good news is we have a long off season and lots of time to see what he's going to be able to do next year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's going. Do you suspect that it might be motivational?
How so?
Well, in that, and I don't get the sense. I think from my impression on the outside looking in, because I'm obviously not in Buffalo and I've never personally met Tyrod Taylor, to me he seems like he's a very humble, hardworking, I kind of hate to use the word working class, but lunch pail kind of guy. He definitely does not come across as a diva, but, maybe there's a sense that he needs that they want to motivate him to become better.
That's a possibility, but I would find that an interesting way of going about it.
Me too. Yeah, no, I completely agree. I'm just, I guess I'm searching for answers here.
What they've got in their mind, and to be very honest with you, and it just leads into other Bill's discussions. But one does have to wonder, what is the strategy? What are they trying to do? What's going on behind closed doors back there? Mm-hmm. There's a lot of questions that Bills fans have, and rightfully so, about what went wrong this year. Mm-hmm. And one of the things could be, and I do wonder about this, okay, how are we managing the development and growth of Tyrod Taylor? And I don't really know the answer to that. But I will say one thing about Tyrod Taylor, and again, like you, I've never met him. I'm going based solely on what I've seen, on and off the field in the form of videos and press conferences and that sort of thing. But I find Tyrod to be an extremely self-assured guy. Mm-hmm. And I think, yes, he's humble. You don't see him out there, doing all kinds of crazy stuff. He's very serious about the way he approaches his job. He seems to be kind of introverted in the sense that, you don't see pictures of him out partying.
He's not Cam Newton or Johnny Manziel. He's not that personality.
This is not him. That's not his style. Mm-hmm. However, so I don't know, in being a psychotherapist, having done that kind of work for a lot of years, I question whether or not, kind of a motivational approach is the best way to approach him. He doesn't need motivation.
Yeah.
I just sort of see him as a guy that, you just support him, you give him what he needs, in terms of any kind of support, for him to learn his trade, and you let him fly.
Yeah.
That's just kind of how I see it with him. But I
find it rather curious. It will be very interesting to see what happens with EJ Manuel. Again, I think that his days in Buffalo are over, but you might expect to see some other competition for Tyrod Taylor. Do you think that it does not sound like he's going to go into 2016 as the anointed starter, which is kind of surprising to me? Has Rex Ryan, of course, Rex Ryan, his future might be a little bit in doubt. Let me ask you,
how fast did that honeymoon
oh my gosh,
go down the tubes?
Listen, I think that Rex Ryan bears a large portion of the blame for the 2015 season. There's no question in my mind, and we'll get to Lesean McCoy and some of the other issues here in a minute. In my opinion, though, I think Tyrod Taylor should definitely go into the 2016 season as the anointed starter. I think he has earned that right.
I would be shocked if that was not the case. I know one thing with certainty. He has 100% support of Rex Ryan. I mean, he's Rex Ryan's baby. Mm-hmm. And, Rex, for whatever Rex's future is, I'm not sure long term, but I think it's safe to say that Rex's job is at least safe through next year. And with that, he'll ride Tyrod. I've never heard Rex say anything that, even remotely resembled anything of a competition that would be happening. I don't see that happening at all.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I think, I think Tyrod is the anointed guy for next year. Now, again, it's like what happens beyond that, I don't know, because he also has a 3-year deal with the 3rd year voidable, and he's already played enough games to void that option year. So, they've got some tough decisions to make. Next, I feel like it's all going to play itself out next year. If they flame out next year, Rex is going to be gone.
Yeah.
I can't imagine them keeping him if they miss the playoffs again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I guess I agree. It's a good discussion. You could have a good debate on how early is too early to give the hook to a coach when it's patently clear that he's a bad fit, or not connecting with the 53 players or whatever in his locker room. And we'll talk about Chip Kelly here in a minute. Great way to segue to that. But I'm not done with the Bills. I want to ask you, Lesean McCoy, good season in Buffalo. He's had, he's being gimpy. Let's put it that way. He's being gimpy. Carlos Williams nipping at his heels. Very, very, very talented guy. The contract situation is interesting. What do you expect from Lesean McCoy in 2016?
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head, and it goes back to his hamstring injury, in training camp. That injury was a lot more serious than I think people, really knew. And as we know, sometimes those hamstrings they're not right for the whole year. And I think probably, I'm thinking back 3 or 4 games ago, you could just see the jump come back in his step. So it took, the better part of the season, for his legs to get back to where, he needs them to be him, which he has. And then, of course, more injuries come along.
Right.
He's had a tough year that way. The other thing, though, is and this is a bit of an aside, but I think about Lesean's emotional state, and with that, it segues into again Chip Kelly. But I think the trade really hit him, in his own way, harder than it would maybe other running backs in similar situations.
He does seem extremely sensitive, and
yes.
that did. I understand that Chip Kelly. We'll go ahead and head into that discussion. Chip Kelly fired last night relieved of his duties is, I think, how they tried to spin that one. It was pretty clear that players did not connect with Chip Kelly. For whatever reason, the black players seemed to think that he was, quote unquote, uncomfortable around them. I would propose that my impression is that Chip Kelly is very much an introvert who probably isn't all that comfortable around people in general, and definitely isn't comfortable being questioned. He's a guy who came from the college system, and it's very different dealing with quote unquote asterisk student athletes as opposed to multi-million-dollar divas who want you to stroke their ego every step of the way.
For sure. And Chip, I think this was a very, it was a humbling experience for him. I hope. And I think that it was telling that there were virtually no players that I have heard that have come to his defense. Have you heard anybody?
There were some interesting tweets when I think that the interesting tweet, and it does sound like the Eagles have said, we don't want you talking about this situation to that locker room. Emmanuel Acho had a very interesting tweet talking about power and absolute power corrupts and all of that. The Eagles' biggest issue, their biggest problem was giving Chip Kelly complete control after relatively, in general. That has really never, ever been proven to work. Bill Parcells made it. Listen, the days of Bill Parcells and even Tony Dungy, those guys being able to do some of the things that they did, I don't know how that would translate to today's NFL.
I think Bill Belichick is probably the closest dinosaur.
But you cannot compare, and that's what I was trying to say on Twitter this morning. Bill Belichick, in that sense, is an outlier. He can do that because he's been with the New England Patriots for a long time. Today's players don't even remember what a spectacular bust he was in Cleveland. They only know his success with the New England Patriots, and it's a different time, and you're dealing with a different generation. Just
absolutely. And, I will always say you'll never be able to tease apart Bill Belichick's legacy from Tom Brady's. Mm-hmm. And what would his legacy be like if he didn't have a quarterback that turned out like Tom Brady did?
Yeah. We're going to have to move on because there's a lot of other things that we want to talk about. I do want to ask you about the defensive issues. What if you had to pick a position on the defensive side of the football that needs the most work outside of the coaching, which we've talked about already? What would you pick?
Oh, for the Bills? Mm-hmm. Definitely would be linebacker and safety, probably.
Secondary, yeah. We keep stealing your best. The Titans keep stealing your best safeties.
Oh, for sure. And we're kind of in tough shape with Aaron Williams because I don't know the extent of his neck injury, but if there's any kind of degenerative part to that problem that he has, he may have some issues to work through. So I think the question of safeties is
Robyn, I think I lost you. I don't know what happened.
Oh, am I gone?
No, you're back now.
Oh, okay, sorry. Anyway,
okay. It happens. Things happen.
Yeah, I do think that in Rex's scheme, safeties are critically important. So I think that's going to be an area he's going to really need to target. But also the linebackers in this proved to be something that I think a lot of us underestimated in terms of a problem. Mm-hmm. The linebackers the Bills have are not particularly suited for Rex's scheme. Mm-hmm. So I think that's an area that they're going to have to target as well.
There were some very interesting comments that came out from several of the defensive players. I want to ask you, first of all, Mario Williams, what do you think that his teammates are unhappy with him?
Yes, I do. Primarily because he's been very vocal throughout the year, and even I ran across a tweet that Thurman Thomas made, actually in a discussion with a fan about Mario, and the question is if is he mailing it in, that sort of thing, and the large consensus of opinion is at this point he really is mailing it in, and it's gotten to cause some divisiveness in the locker room. Mm-hmm. Even on the offensive side, Eric Wood really stepped up and made I thought, a very interesting comment about 4 or 5 days ago, maybe a week ago, with respect to Rex's scheme. Because Mario was complaining about the scheme, and Eric Wood said, look we have to prepare against his scheme. His was the hardest one to ever have to prepare against. And so there was that, that back and forth sort of tangle in the media between Eric Wood well, and not directly, but he's, basically saying, look, Mario, get it together. And Thurman made a remark that he basically thought that it wasn't really okay to just mail it in. Mm-hmm. And something along those lines. And so that kind of raised my eyebrows, and oh boy, yeah, there seems to be a problem. And people are really focusing a lot on Mario, but I would also encourage anybody that's really interested in this, go look at the last few interviews that have been done with Jerry Hughes. Mm-hmm. He doesn't look like a real happy camper in this defense either. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I don't think he's bought in. And so this is going to really require some big time figuring out what you're going to do with that, mm-hmm. Rex.
Yeah. Very interesting times. Guys are coming out. Sammy Watkins had some interesting things to say. It's always a fine line, I think, though, when I appreciate guys speaking their mind, first and foremost. I've been extremely critical of Lesean McCoy, how Lesean McCoy has talked about, Chip Kelly and all that, simply because it just came across as childish and immature and petty. That's not the kind of situation I'm talking about. I'm talking about guys who are willing to come public and hold other guys accountable. There is a difference. Maybe you should learn it, Shady, but I think very telling that these guys are coming forward. They are speaking up. Hopefully, though, during the off season, they will deal with a lot of these issues in-house and get them corrected. How willing do you think Rex Ryan is to listen to these criticisms?
That's a good question, because on the outside, again, if I could meet him and sit down with him for a little while, I'd get a better take on him. But the way that he appears to project himself, I think he's pretty stubborn and thin-skinned mm-hmm. at times. Mm-hmm. So I wonder about that.
Yeah, I wonder about it too. I think that's one of the biggest question marks in my mind right now about Rex Ryan and where he stands with the Bills and with the Bills locker room and what might possibly happen in 2016 and even beyond, if he's going to continue to be the Buffalo Bills coach. I want to ask you about Bill Polian. Tell us about that. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, anybody that follows me on Twitter probably knows exactly what I thought about it. As just kind of a primer, I think it was a couple weeks ago, Bill Polian put out a flyer, if you will, mm-hmm. that he might be available for consultation purposes, for the Bills, so that they can sort out all their problems and, mm-hmm. move on happily ever after. At which point, there were numerous.
I can't stop laughing. Please go on.
Oh yeah, that's fine. It was mind-boggling, because part of what he offered in terms of his consultation expertise, in quotes, mm-hmm. Was his observation that the Bills' offensive line was, quote, old and unathletic. To which most of the media, including Rex Ryan, said, what? Huh? It was like, what? Oh, my God. Okay, first of all, there's only a couple that are even over 30. The right guard's a rookie. And to call them unathletic, I think, is really kind of unfair. I mean, Richie Incognito's had, a great year. Mm-hmm.
He's the one that came to mind. Whatever you want to say, and however you feel about Richie Incognito as, a person, he's pretty darn athletic.
Very, very much so. So, I'm thinking when we look ahead, it's going to be interesting times. Interesting times. Yeah. I just looked at something else and lost my train of thought. Where was I?
I don't know. We were talking about Bill Polian.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well, I try to let that train of thought. So the second thing that he comes out.
And Richie Incognito. I don't know if you had any follow-up thoughts on him.
Yeah. Richie's had a great year and you and I kind of talked about this before. Mm-hmm. I was sad that he wasn't, he's a Pro Bowl alternate, which was great, but I thought he played worthy of, first ballot, whatever, first string guard. I thought he had an outstanding year.
Yeah.
And, so he was kind of overlooked that way, in my view. But for Bill Polian to make this kind of observation, and I laughed at Rex's comment because Rex just basically, because they asked him about what he thought, and Rex said, well, I don't necessarily agree with that, but everybody's entitled to their opinion. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And so I'm thinking to myself, oh, good. So if that's what you want to do is bring in a football czar that already doesn't see eye to eye with the coach about the offensive line. Oh, no. And then, of course, he being Bill Polian, also made some commentary about Tyrod. Mm-hmm. And, he doesn't think that Tyrod's the guy, that he worries that because he, runs around so much, he's just going to get hurt. Mm-hmm. And to which that point, I really went over the edge and chuckled. Because then I see the stat that we talked about at the opening of the show, where Tyrod is ranked third, in the NFL is in quarterback rating out of the pocket.
It's crazy.
What is he watching?
I mean, again, I'm befuddled. I am legitimately befuddled by how little respect Tyrod Taylor got for what I consider to be just an outstanding year. We could spend so much time on the Bills. It's going to be fun, It's going to be fun this offseason. I think I've already asked you this, but I want to ask you again. What are your expectations for 2016?
Playoffs are bust. Mm-hmm. This cannot go on another year. And they have the core. They need a linebacker or two. They need a safety or two. Mm-hmm. They need another tackle, probably. Mm-hmm. They need to sign Gordy Glenn, I can tell you that much. Mm-hmm. And that may happen as a result of maybe Mario, parting ways with Mario would save them a lot of money under the cap. And if he's not happy and he doesn't want to play in that kind of a scheme, then I can't imagine paying him, whatever, $12 million or whatever his contract is for next year. Mm-hmm. What I expect is playoffs. Yeah.
Well, I think that's
whatever they have to do to get there.
They've been knocking at that door for a couple of, and I understand that they did change, coaching staffs and all that, but they've got the talent.
For sure.
They have the talent to make the playoffs, and I agree. If they don't make the playoffs in 2016, I suspect it won't just be Rex Ryan who might be skating on thin ice. I mean, the GM is, and I never can remember his name. It always.
Doug Whaley.
Doug Whaley, thank you.
He's done an awesome job. He's done.
I love him, but you know what? It's a results-driven league.
Yep, absolutely. And you know what? He was in the transition era when EJ Manuel was drafted. That some people will still put that on Buddy Nix, but Doug Whaley was very thick in that decision making.
I consider EJ Manuel to be a Doug Whaley pick. I do. Yeah. But you know what? I'm not going to knock him for a swing and a miss. You want to hit. That draft class was bad.
It was bad.
Well, he was EJ Manuel, first guy taken, the only quarterback taken in the first round. He's lost his starting job. The next guy, Geno Smith, he's lost his starting job. I mean, we could go on and on and on and on. It's easy to knock a guy for missing, but when you look at what he's dealing with, it's kind of hard to, and it's a similar situation. People want to knock the Tennessee Titans for the Jake Locker pick, but I mean, what was the alternative? It's,
Exactly. And on the other hand, Doug Whaley can also, there are people who are, giving him kind of a side eye about the fact that he gave up 2 draft picks. Yeah. Sammy Watkins in a year when, they had a plethora of wide receivers with talent.
Yeah. Hey, Robyn, I've lost you again. I don't know what's going on with your mic.
Okay. Is it any better?
Yeah, you're back now. Yeah,
Okay.
it is. Let's go ahead and move on. I want to ask you. There's not a lot of information out there about it, but the Evander Kane. What is it with the Kane boys? The Evander Kane investigation, another sexual assault investigation involving a hockey player. Help us make sense of that.
I don't have much to go on other than what you just said right there. Allegedly, there was an incident at a downtown hotel.
He's staying there, right? That's where he's living.
Correct. And really, there hasn't been very much said at all. In fact, there have been no charges filed. They have not released the victim's name. And I think that in great part, all of this is being handled, pretty much on the hush-hush, because I think the Patrick Kane situation, it was felt by a lot of people in the area that it got kind of out of control.
It did. Media. There's no question it did. Yeah.
And exactly. And I think the police this time around are saying, nothing. And they are, keeping their lips buttoned. And so we don't know anything about the circumstances beyond what I just told you. Mm-hmm. And Evander Kane stepped up yesterday and said that he was comfortable, that he first of all, he didn't feel that he did anything wrong, and that he was very comfortable with just letting the law enforcement, let things play out. He has his representation, and he's not going to have any comment at this point in time. And he played, that night in a loss to the Capitals, and I think they're playing again tonight. So we'll see. But there's no information to be had.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they have been very, very hush-hush. And, it's, again, I mean, it's a double-edged sword, too, in a way. But in order to ensure what you hope, and I'm very, very, very consciously putting hope, emphasis to the hope, that the investigation is being conducted thoroughly and without bias concerning his superstar status and who he might play for and any other considerations that go along with that.
Right. And hopefully from some of the faux pas that happened in the 1.0 Patrick Kane investigation, they will have done a better job, crossing their T's and dotting their I's. And I, for one, I'm more comfortable, to be honest with you, not having, this drama being played out in the media until the facts are gathered.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But, again, it's a double-edged sword because the flip side to that is if it's not being done in the manner to which you would hope and expect and pray, that it's being handled, it is and should be and shall always be the obligation of the media to report on that. And
they walk such a fine line. I read an article that Tim Graham wrote up a summary the other day. And it included some of the other information about what Evander Kane had been doing in the community. And presumably, there was a person on Twitter that was saying, well, why are you writing all this stuff about all the good stuff that he's doing in the community when this is, an article about, these allegations? Mm-hmm. And basically, nobody responded to that, but I was thinking to myself, well, of course, you don't want to paint someone in the media by only focusing on one aspect of themselves. In other words, I think the legal team basically says, okay, you want to make sure that, you put fair and balanced reporting out there. Mm-hmm. That you don't just put out there that he's a criminal. So I think that's why some of the coverage kind of went in that direction, but people were not quite understanding that. Mm-hmm. And I guess what I'm saying is I really do agree with you in that I think the media has a really tough time. They have people coming at them from every direction in terms of, you need to do this and, you need to cover that. And the bottom line is they need to be able to do their jobs. And we have to be able to trust that they will be professional, just as we have to be able to trust that law enforcement is going to be professional and go about their jobs, as you say, with integrity.
Yeah. Yes. And stay tuned for that. We'll see how all of that goes down. I have to move on. There's still a lot to talk about. Big news today. Bill Cosby, we're going to wrap this segment up with that. But I want to ask you, Miko Grimes has been, I've talked about her a lot this week. Talked about her with Jennifer Eakins in another segment on this podcast. I want to get your thoughts on it. Miko Grimes, the wife of Miami Dolphins cornerback Brent Grimes, is very vocal and brash and bold and vulgar and a lot of other adjectives you could throw out there on her social media page, including being very critical of some media members who cover her husband's team, and she has received a lot of backlash over it. I am Team Miko, just, as I suppose a disclaimer. I think that a lot of the criticism of her can be boiled down to sexism, misogyny, in a way that I think a lot of people don't understand. But I want to get your thoughts on it. Are you familiar with her, or do you know?
Well, I haven't. I haven't read about this extensively, but just kind of peripherally know the nuts and bolts of what's been happening. And the first thing that comes to mind for me is, why are we trying to put a muzzle on people from saying what they think? And why do we judge her when somebody like Gisele Bundchen can come out and say stuff like, well, my husband can't fucking throw the ball and catch it at the same time.
Yeah, right.
And nobody criticized her for that.
Robyn, I've lost you again.
Oh, are we here?
Yeah, I've got you back.
Okay. So I don't know. Why do we have a different set of standards?
Well, I do. I think we do. It's caught up in our societal view of what is approving and attractive and desirable in a woman. And Gisele, in a lot of ways, does have that. She's a supermodel, I think that she's retired now or is retiring. Obviously, she's a beautiful woman. Miko Grimes is a beautiful woman, too. She, as far as I know, has never been in the business of selling that. She doesn't sell her body or her beauty or her attractiveness in that fashion. I said on my show last night, Going for Two with Zach Law, I said, I think that in a lot of ways, Miko Grimes would have been better off stripping as opposed to being an outspoken. Listen, mouthy women make men uncomfortable. We just do. We make men uncomfortable, and I would include that myself in that category. I'm pretty mouthy.
Chalk one up for me, because I'd be standing right there in line. I can honestly say that one of the biggest issues I've ever had to deal with in my life repeatedly is trying to get respect, and in terms of being blunt. I say what I think. When I was in private practice as a therapist, people weren't paying me to be nice to them. Mm-hmm. They wanted help. They wanted somebody that was going to be real and tell them what they really saw as their perception of the truth. And we just don't have that anymore. It's all about being politically correct. It's all about being a good girl. And we still have that. We're still stuck in that good girl.
Sugar and spice and all that's nice. And it's better to look pretty and sound pretty than it is to, to be a truth teller or, what have you. And look, I'm not her, and I don't want to be anyone besides Sharona. Okay, I'm going to be who I am because my own experiences and my, everything that I've gone through makes up who I am, just like, anybody else. And, but I definitely, support her right to be who she is. And, I find more than a little bit of the criticism and the commentary and whatever to be more than a tad bit misogynistic and disgusting.
I agree wholeheartedly. It's hypocrisy at its worst. And, it's something obviously you've dealt with in your lifetime, I've dealt with in my lifetime, and it's not going anywhere, at least at this point, sadly. And I feel for her, because I can, she's an articulate woman. She had a point of view.
She knows her shit. She knows her stuff, and you might prefer that she share that with you in a different manner. But you know what? It's not your decision. It's not your job to tell her how to live her life.
Exactly.
And I've said this before, and I'm going to say it again. The Miami Dolphins have much bigger issues to worry about than what Miko Grimes is putting on her social media page. And the media has a much better and bigger job than worrying about it, too, even if it's about you.
I'm pretty sure the Miami Dolphins are really happy to have the media be obsessed with this.
Yeah. Anyway, let's move on. Bill Cosby. Big news today. At last count, I quit keeping count. It's a disgustingly sad story. 50 women, probably more than 50 women, have come forward to share their stories about being abused sexually or otherwise by Bill Cosby, a guy who most of us, I think, grew up idolizing and thinking of as an icon, not just in the black community, but as an entertainer and a comedian and what have you. I've said this before, I'll say it again. We do not know our entertainers, whether they're football players, musicians, movie stars, politicians, even the person next door. The public face is very different from the private one in a lot of cases. And I think Bill Cosby is a guy that can, exemplify that for us. Charges have finally been brought against him for an incident. It was, I think, like 12 days before the expiration of the statute of limitations. He's been charged with a sexual crime. Have you had a chance to check out this story?
Yes, absolutely. And I've been following it all the way along. And the first thing that came to my mind when the charges were filed was, phew, because I was waiting. I was aware of that deadline, approaching. Mm-hmm. But the other thing that I thought about was, okay, I hope this will put the brakes on his lawsuits against, for defamation, because that is just abhorrent to me, to think that these women are going to have to go through more stuff and, have to face defamation lawsuits and whatnot. And hopefully now that will eventually put that all to rest. But this sort of reminded me of the situation with O.J. Simpson when he was arrested and finally put in prison for robbery and whatever it was that he ended up in prison in Nevada.
A different crime from the alleged murder for which he was tried the first time.
But there was some carryover probably in the sentencing, at least to the extent that the law allows, of course, in terms of keeping him in jail. And I hope, it's my hope, that if Bill Cosby is found guilty in Pennsylvania that they will throw the book at him. Because these other these other situations, the statute of limitations has run out. But I think the greater question is, or the greater effect will be, I should say, on forcing him to become a registered sex offender.
It's interesting. Bill Cosby, a lot of famous names have come out in support of him. Chris Rock is the guy who I lost a lot. I like Chris Rock. I still like Chris Rock. I think he's a very funny guy. His support of Bill Cosby has been nauseating to me, though, and there are a lot of people who still continue, to support him. I think Whoopi Goldberg might have continued to support him, among others. I don't want to really focus on naming names as much as the thought process and the idea that because we have this picture of someone in our mind of who they are and what they are, that we can't get past that. And I know that your background makes you pretty perfect to answer this question. How do you think that we can get beyond all of that? How do we, as a society, learn to look behind that the Oz curtain and see who people are, see people for who they truly are?
Wow, that's a loaded question. It's a good one. We all have to, for one thing, I think we all have to get real, with ourselves in terms of understanding what motivates us to respond the way that we do. But the bigger question is, in my mind, how can we move past idolizing people, and to the point where, a lot of times, you see this character that someone plays, like Dr. Huxtable, and you get once a week for umpteen years reinforced in your brain. You see the picture of this man, and you get all of the impressions in your head that he can do no wrong. And he goes out in his personal life and he does something that, is completely wrong. It creates cognitive dissonance. And that is something that people aren't often comfortable addressing, their own cognitive dissonance. And the truth of the matter is that we all should strive to be more objective about our own emotions, and what may stimulate us to see things in a certain way, and to try to be as objective as we can. As far as, I don't know what to say about a society that has funny rules, and legal minds can, probably laugh at me about this, but funny rules that define, operationally define sex offender, that operationally define X.
Well, let's not forget, for literally eons, what we know as our judicial system has been shaped, formed, and fashioned by primarily white men.
Yep.
And so this discussion really kind of applies across the board. It applies toward the very real outrage and well-justified outrage over police shootings and the failure of our justice system to provide, justice for the victims who have been killed and unjustifiably killed by police officers in this country. And it is because the system has systemically been prejudiced against people of color, women, the disenfranchised. It's not, we're only one, women only got the right to vote, 100 years ago. Some odd.
And the first state they got the right to do that in was where I live in Wyoming.
Yeah, it's crazy, and in a lot of ways, women are still fighting against the whole notion that and this ties into the Miko Grimes, conversation. This whole notion that we're chattel and property, and to be seen
Absolutely.
and not heard, and
I think you make a great point, Sharona, about our rules and rules of law are, based on what? English common law, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Well, who are they?
Yeah, and that comes from, we all sort of pull from, things that we identify with and that satisfy our own preconceived notions of what is right and just and pretty and proper and good. And that's, I think that I've always been kind of a rebel at heart, and I identify with rebels and, people who fight against that, those preconceived notions.
Well, I have to laugh when you say that because my maiden name was Rebl.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. And I had to live up to it or down to it, whatever way when you want to look at it. But yeah. It brings up a really good point, though. You bring up such a good point. Isn't the bottom line to all of this that we have to stop separating we and they? And it's all a we,
Oh. Well, I think that we're never going to get anywhere as a society if we focus only on what we think and we're not open to considering other thoughts, other opinions, other things other than our own preconceived notions. Constantly question ourselves and our own beliefs about what women should be, what our justice system should be, what is justice. If you only look at that from your own lens, you're going to get an incomplete picture.
Not only incomplete, but horribly narrow-minded. Mm-hmm. And that's where I think all of this, leads us is to the place where we need to stop judging one another, so harshly, and start embracing common sense.
Mm-hmm. Well, common sense is just not so common anymore. I mean, that's kind of a cliched term, I suppose, but it's just not. I don't know that. I think if we're relying on that, we're maybe in trouble. Hopefully, we'll get maybe a little bit farther. I'm sorry.
What I found is that if you're willing to look at yourself and be, to be objective. To understand that when someone says something to you, like, I don't like it when you blah, 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 that instead of getting angry with that person, that you step back and you do a little bit of introspection and on your own, really think about it objectively, the world would be a better place.
It would be. It would be. We're certainly not there yet. Hopefully we are, getting a little closer to being there. I don't know. But back to Bill Cosby, we sort of got a little bit off track. You're right. This is not the only legal proceeding that he is currently undergoing or will be undergoing. There are lawsuits out there. It appears that many of the victims are willing to come forward and testify for the other victims. And so there's, it's kind of great to see as a survivor of abuse. I can say that we're seeing an unprecedented time in which women are willing to defend other women and come forward and help each other out, and that kind of sisterhood is something that I've longed for years, and hopefully we'll continue to see more of that in the future.
You bet. The other thing that leads me to is a question, and it's one that I've been scratching my head about quite a bit through the years of this ongoing story with Bill Cosby, is Mrs. Cosby,
Mm-hmm.
Camille. I have a hard time trying to get a handle on where she's at with all of this.
Mm-hmm. And denial, I suspect.
Oh, I think so. And I guess that's part of it. It's like, wow, she's a woman. At what level does she not connect with that, as a woman to woman, sister to sister? Mm-hmm. And that's something that I find head scratching. And I don't want to vilify her. I really don't. But at the same time, part of me wants to just shake her and say, "Come on, what?"
Yeah. Well, maybe they say ignorance is bliss, and maybe she just doesn't want to know. I don't know. Interesting stuff, Robyn. It's always so great to have you on. Tell everybody out there where they can find you on social media, and how's the new website and stuff going?
Oh, great. Buffalo, www.buffalofam, as in family, FAM base. So it's buffalofambase.org. I'm the editor-in-chief and having a blast. We're lining up some new contributing authors that I think people are going to get really excited about. Got some other ideas that we're going to branch off with. And you can always follow me at WyoBillsFan, WYOBILZFAN. And I really enjoy any opportunity I can get to work with Sharona because we have fun.
Yeah, we do have fun. Always a pleasure to have you on. Robyn, have a happy new year, and hopefully we'll talk soon.
Yes, same to you.